The Millionaire mocked her, but the cleaner played the piano like a classical master. Emily Johnson felt her hands tremble as she wiped the damp cloth over the keys of the grand piano. It was her 3rd month working at the Blackwells' mansion in New York City, and that instrument always left her nostalgic in a way she struggled to hide. That was when Richard Blackwell entered the hall with 2 foreign business partners. The businessman stopped and laughed loudly when he saw her. "Look at this amusing scene," he said in English to the visitors. "A cleaner polishing a $200,000 Steinway. I bet she doesn't even know this is a piano." The men laughed along, and Emily felt her face burn with shame. She kept cleaning in silence, pretending not to understand the language. "These people only know country music and hip-hop," Richard continued, now in English, looking directly at her. "They could never grasp the complexity of Chopin or Mozart. It's a matter of class, you know. Some things are just born in you." Emily took a deep breath and stood up, tucking the cloth into her cleaning cart. Something inside her snapped at that moment. "Excuse me, sir," she said, surprising everyone by addressing her employer directly. Richard raised an eyebrow, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "What do you want?" "May I play a piece before finishing the cleaning?" Silence filled the hall. The foreign partners watched curiously, while Richard burst into laughter. "You want to play?" he repeated, incredulous. "My dear, you probably don't even know where Middle C is." "Just one piece," Emily insisted, her voice steady despite her nerves. Richard glanced at his partners and shrugged. "Fine, let's have some fun. Play your little folk tune." Emily approached the piano bench and sat down. Her hands hovered over the keys for a moment, and she closed her eyes. When she opened them, there was no hesitation left. The first notes of Nocturne in E-flat major, opus 9 No, Tattoo by Chopin echoed through the hall with such perfection that Richard choked on his own breath. Emily played with flawless technique, each note crystal clear and brimming with emotion. The foreign partners exchanged stunned glances. Richard turned pale, immediately recognizing he was witnessing a professional performance of the highest caliber. Emily kept playing, lost in music she hadn't heard in years. Her hands danced across the keys with the grace of a ballerina, executing every difficult passage as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The trembling that always plagued her had vanished completely. When the final note faded into the air, the silence was deafening. Richard stood frozen like a statue, his face utterly bewildered. "My God," one of the partners murmured in English. "She plays better than many concert pianists I've heard." Emily rose calmly and returned to her cleaning cart. "May I finish cleaning now, sir?" she asked as if nothing had happened. Richard couldn't form words. He watched her silently clean the rest of the hall, his mind struggling to process what he'd just witnessed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now continuing, as Emily pushed her cart out of the room, Richard still stood rooted in place. His partners nudged him, trying to snap him out of his daze. "Richard, who is that woman?" asked David, the American partner. I don't know," Richard stammered. "She's just a cleaner I hired a few months ago." "That is not just a cleaner," said Jean, the Frenchman. "I studied piano for 15 years in Paris, and I can assure you she has high-level classical training. That kind of technique isn't learned just anywhere." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. He had humiliated a woman who clearly had more talent in one hand than he had in his entire business empire. That night he couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in bed, replaying every note Emily had played, every graceful movement of her hands. How had he been so blind, so prejudiced? The next morning, Richard came down for breakfast, determined to talk to Emily. But Mrs. Wilson, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for 20 years, said she hadn't shown up. "She never misses work, Mr. Blackwell," said Wilson, concerned. "Yesterday, she left here acting strange after you had those visitors." Richard felt a pang of guilt. Had Emily been so shaken that she decided not to come back? "Wilson, do you know anything about her past?" The housekeeper hesitated before answering. "She's very private, sir. All I know is that she lives alone in a small apartment in Queens and works several jobs to make ends meet. But there's something about her, a deep sadness she tries to hide." What kind of sadness? I can't explain it. It's like she lost something very important and never got over it. Richard spent the whole day at the office, but couldn't focus on anything. By the afternoon, he made a decision that surprised even himself. He went to Queens to look for Emily. He had never been to that part of the city before. The streets were simple, the houses small and close together. After asking around, he finally got Emily's address from a neighbor. The building was old and in need of repairs. Richard climbed to the third floor and knocked on apartment 32. No one answered. "She's not here," said a voice behind him. Richard turned and saw a gray-haired woman watching him curiously. "Do you know where she is?" "Who's asking?" "I'm a friend," Richard lied, realizing his expensive clothes gave him away as her employer. The woman looked him up and down. "A friend? Young man, Emily doesn't have friends. She barely talks to the neighbors. This morning she left in a hurry with a small suitcase. Said she was going on a trip but didn't say where." Richard's heart sank. Emily had run away and he knew it was because of him. "Have you known her long?" "About 2 years. She moved here out of nowhere, always pays rent on time, always polite, but never shares anything about her life. All I know is sometimes, late at night, I hear a piano playing in there." Richard's eyes widened. "A piano? She has a piano in her apartment?" "Must be one of those small electric ones. She plays beautifully, you know. Sometimes I stay awake just to listen. Lovely classical music. But she always stops when she thinks someone might be listening." Richard went home with a heavy heart. Emily had disappeared, and he didn't know how to find her. Worse, he didn't know how to fix the damage he had done. In the days that followed, Richard became a different person. He couldn't stop thinking about Emily and the music she had played. He hired a private investigator to try and locate her, but without success. A week later, Mrs. Wilson brought disturbing news. "Mr. Blackwell, Emily's neighbor, called me. She's back, but she's very sick. It seems she fainted in the street, and the neighbors had to help." Richard didn't think twice. He grabbed his keys and drove straight to Emily's apartment. This time, when he knocked, she answered. What he saw shocked him deeply. Emily was pale, with dark circles under her eyes, her hands visibly trembling. She recognized him immediately and tried to shut the door, but Richard was faster. "Emily, please, I need to talk to you." "We have nothing to say, Mr. Blackwell," she said weakly. "I got the message. People like me shouldn't touch instruments like that." "No, you've got it all wrong," Richard said desperately. "I came here to apologize." Emily stared at him in disbelief. "Apologize? I was an idiot. A prejudiced fool. You play piano better than anyone I've ever known, and I humiliated you out of pure ignorance and arrogance." "You know nothing about me," Emily said, tears beginning to fall. "You don't know what I've been through, what I've lost." "Then tell me," Richard said, stepping into the apartment without asking. "Tell me your story." The apartment was tiny but impeccably organized and clean. In the corner of the living room, Richard saw a simple electric keyboard on a makeshift stand. Emily sat on the old couch and buried her face in her hands. "Why are you here? Why can't you just leave me alone?" "Because I need to understand," Richard said, sitting beside her. "I need to understand how a woman with your talent is working as a cleaner." Emily was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with pain. "I was a professional pianist," she began. "I started playing at 4, gave my first concert at 12. I won national and international competitions. By 22, I was considered one of the most promising classical pianists in the United States." Richard listened quietly, beginning to grasp the magnitude of the tragedy. "I was at the peak of my career. I had just signed a contract to record my first album and was about to tour Europe. My life was perfect. I was happy." "What happened?" Richard asked softly. "A car accident," Emily said, lifting her trembling hands. 5 years ago, I was driving back from a concert in Rochester when a truck ran a red light and hit my car. Both my wrists were fractured and I had nerve damage in my hands." Richard felt his stomach twist. "The doctors said I'd never play professionally again, that even with surgery and physical therapy the tremors would be constant, and I'd lose the precision needed for classical piano. But you just played perfectly in my home." "For a few minutes," Emily said, showing him her hands, which shook uncontrollably. When I'm deeply focused, when the music takes over, the tremors stop. But I never know for how long, sometimes seconds, sometimes minutes, never enough for a full concert. Richard began to understand the cruelty of the fate that had befallen her. After the accident, I lost everything. The contract was cancelled, my managers abandoned me, doors closed. No one wanted a pianist who couldn't control her own hands. I spent all my savings on treatments that didn't work. And your family. My parents invested everything in my music career from the time I was little. When the dream ended, they fell into deep depression. They couldn't look at me without seeing a lifetime of sacrifices gone to waste. I distanced myself to spare them more pain. Emily stood and walked to the window, gazing at the busy street outside. For the last 5 years, I've survived by cleaning houses. It's the only work I can get without professional references. I hide my past because people either pity me or think I'm lying. Why didn't you seek help? There are support programs for artists. I tried, Emily said bitterly, but when you fall from the top, everyone vanishes. The friends from the arts world disappeared. Managers stopped returning calls. I became a ghost of who I used to be. Richard stood and moved closer to her. Emily, I came here because I want to help. I want to make things right. You can't fix anything, she said, turning to face him. You can't give me back my career. You can't heal my hands. You can't erase these 5 years of humiliation. I can try, Richard insisted. I can hire the best doctors, pay for any treatment. In exchange for what? Emily asked suspiciously. People like you never do anything for free. For nothing in return, Richard said sincerely. Just for you to forgive me for being the most prejudiced fool in the world. Emily studied him for a long moment. There was something different about him, a sincerity she hadn't seen the day before. Why is this so important to you? Richard hesitated before answering. Because in those few minutes you played, I felt something I'd never felt in my life. Pure beauty, real talent. And I realized I've spent 40 years surrounded by expensive, empty things, never witnessing something truly precious. Emily felt her eyes fill with tears again. You don't understand. I'm not the pianist I used to be. I'm just a broken woman trying to survive. You're not broken, Richard said, stepping closer. You're hurt. There's a difference. Broken things can't be fixed. Hurt things can heal. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Richard didn't go home. He stayed talking with Emily until dawn, listening to stories of her musical childhood, her shattered dreams, and her daily struggle not to give up on life. When the sun rose, a decision had been made. Richard called his private doctor and scheduled an urgent appointment for Emily with the best neurologist in the country. I can't afford this, Emily protested. I didn't ask you to pay, Richard replied. I just asked you not to give up. In the following days, Richard cancelled all his professional commitments to accompany Emily to her medical appointments. The neurologist, Dr. William Tanner, was impressed by her case. There are indeed peripheral nerve injuries, he explained, but they're not irreversible. There's an experimental treatment combining microsurgery with regenerative therapy. It's expensive and not guaranteed, but I've seen promising results in similar cases. How much does it cost? Richard asked immediately. Around $300,000, not counting specialized physical therapy sessions. Emily paled, but Richard didn't hesitate. We'll do the treatment. Mr. Blackwell, I can't accept this, Emily said. You're not accepting anything, Richard replied. You're giving me the chance to do something useful with my money for the first time in my life. The treatment began the following week. While Emily underwent her medical sessions, Richard learned more about her past. He discreetly hired a detective to trace her history and was shocked by what he found. Emily hadn't lied about anything. She truly had been a national prodigy, with glowing reviews in major newspapers and videos of performances showcasing exceptional talent. The investigator even found a newspaper article about the accident, with photos of the wrecked car. More shocking was discovering that Emily had sold all her valuables over the years just to survive. Expensive musical instruments, jewelry she'd won as prizes, even the house she'd bought with her earnings as a concert pianist. Richard also learned she kept sporadic contact with her old music teachers, who always asked about her, but could never offer real help. One afternoon, while waiting for Emily to finish a physical therapy session, Richard received an unexpected call. "Hello, is this Richard Blackwell?" "Yes, who's speaking?" "My name is Professor Margaret Williams. I'm from the Manhattan Music Academy. I heard you're helping Emily Johnson." Richard was surprised. How had this woman found out about him? "Emily gave me your number," the professor explained. "She told me about the treatment she's undergoing. Mr. Blackwell, you should know that Emily was the best student I've had in 40 years of teaching. There isn't a pianist in the United States with her natural talent." She told me about her past. "Not everything," the professor said. "She didn't mention that she turned down a scholarship to Vienna a week before the accident. She was going to study with the greatest masters in the world. She also didn't tell you that she composed several original pieces still performed by orchestras in other countries to this day." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. Emily was even more talented than he'd imagined. "Professor, may I ask why you're calling me?" "Because I want to help. If the treatment works, if she can control the tremors, I want to organize a special concert for her, a triumphant return." "Will she agree?" "I don't know. Emily is terrified. She protects herself by expecting nothing, so she won't be disappointed again. But with your help, maybe we can convince her." When Emily left physical therapy, Richard told her about the professor's call. Her reaction was immediate and negative. "No," she said firmly. "I don't want anyone in the music world to know what I'm doing. I don't want pity or false hope." "Emily, it's not pity. It's recognition of your talent." "My talent is gone," she said bitterly. "You don't understand. It's not just about my hands stopping the tremors. It's been 5 years without professional practice. 5 years without a stage, without pressure, without the discipline a concert pianist needs. Then we'll give that back to you," Richard said. "We'll give you time and space to regain your form." "How?" Richard had been thinking about it all week. "Come live in my house, not as an employee, but as my guest. Use the piano as much as you want. Hire whatever teachers you need. Dedicate yourself entirely to music." Emily stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. "That's absurd. Your family will think it's strange." "My family can think whatever they want," Richard said. "In fact, you might help me with some issues with my son." "What issues?" "Tyler is 16 and hates me. Thinks I'm a cold, materialistic businessman who only cares about money. Maybe you could teach him music, show him there's beauty in the world beyond spreadsheet numbers." Emily was silent for a long moment. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Richard sighed deeply. "Because that day, when you played the piano, I saw who you really are, and I realized who I really am. I didn't like what I saw in myself." "And who are you?" "A man who built a business empire, but never created anything truly beautiful. A man who accumulated wealth, but never made art. A man who judges people by appearances and forgets that the most precious treasures sometimes come in simple wrapping." Emily felt something stir in her chest, a sensation she hadn't felt in years. Hope. "If I accept, there have to be clear rules," she said. "I'm not your charity case. I'll work for what I receive. I can give piano lessons, organize musical events, anything to justify your help." "Deal," Richard said, smiling for the first time in days. A week later, Emily moved into the Blackwell mansion. The family's reaction was exactly what Richard expected. His wife, Victoria, was furious. "You've completely lost your mind," Victoria shouted in their bedroom. "You brought a housekeeper to live in our home?" "She's not a housekeeper. She's a pianist." "A pianist who cleans houses to survive. Does that make any sense?" "More sense than a socialite who spends $50,000 a month on salons and has never done anything useful in her life," Richard replied coldly. The Blackwells' marriage had been hanging by a thread for years. Victoria was a shallow woman who had married Richard for money and social status. They had slept in separate bedrooms for 3 years and only kept up appearances in public. But Tyler, the couple's son, reacted completely differently. On Helena's first day in the house, he found her playing the piano in the music room Richard had specially prepared for her. Wow, he murmured, leaning against the doorframe. You play really well. Helena stopped playing and turned to him. Thank you. You must be Tyler. Yeah, my dad said you're staying here. For a while. I hope you don't mind. Tyler walked closer to the piano. Can I watch you play? Of course. Helena played a simplified version of Beethoven's Ode to Joy. Tyler was mesmerized. How did you learn to play like that? Lots of practice. Want to try? That afternoon, Helena gave her first piano lesson in 5 years. Tyler was a natural student with a good ear and nimble fingers. More importantly, he was genuinely interested. No one ever taught me music before, he said. My dad thinks it's a waste of time. Music is never a waste of time, Helena replied. It's one of the few things that make life worth living. In the following days, Helena established a routine in the house. She woke early and practiced piano for 4 hours, alternating between technical exercises and complex pieces. In the afternoon, she taught Tyler and planned musical activities. The tremors in her hands were gradually improving with treatment, but they were still unpredictable. Some days she could play for hours without issue. Other days, she could barely manage a simple scale. Richard watched from a distance, fascinated to see Helena flourishing again. She was gaining weight, color had returned to her face, and most importantly, she had begun to smile. But not everything was peaceful in the mansion. Victoria went out of her way to make Helena's life difficult whenever possible. She made snide remarks about her humble background, spread gossip among her friends about her husband's affair with the help, and even sabotaged small things like hiding sheet music or detuning the piano. Helena endured it all in silence, focused on her recovery. But Richard was growing increasingly irritated with his wife's behavior. The situation exploded on a Thursday evening. Helena was playing for Tyler when Victoria arrived drunk from a charity dinner. "What awful music," she said loudly, entering the room. "Sounds like a cat screeching." "Mom, Emily was teaching me Chopin," Tyler protested. "Chopin?" Victoria laughed mockingly. "A nobody playing Chopin? What a joke." Helena stopped playing, her hands beginning to shake from nerves. "Victoria, you're drunk," Richard said, stepping into the room. "Go to bed." "I'm not going anywhere," she snapped. "This is my house too, and I won't stand by while this woman lives here pretending to be something she's not." "And what is she pretending to be?" Richard asked coldly. "An artist, a pianist. She's a maid, Richard, a housekeeper you brought here for some shady reason I don't even want to imagine." Helena stood from the piano bench, clearly shaken. "Maybe I should leave," she said quietly. "No," Richard said firmly. "The one who's leaving is the one being disrespectful." "Disrespectful?" Victoria shrieked. "I've been your wife for 20 years. I won't be humiliated in my own home by some intruder." "Mom, stop it," Tyler interjected. "Emily is amazing. She's taught me more in 2 weeks than all the private tutors you hired in 16 years. "Stay out of this, boy," Victoria snapped. "You're just a kid being manipulated by this woman." That was the last straw for Richard. "Enough," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Emily, please, keep playing. Victoria, come with me." Now, Richard led his wife to the office and slammed the door shut. "Sit down," he ordered. "Richard, you've completely lost control of this situation. That woman is destroying our family." "Our family?" Richard laughed bitterly. "What family, Victoria? You spend your days wasting my money on frivolities. Tyler avoids you because you've never shown real interest in him, and we haven't had a decent conversation in years." "This has nothing to do with her." "It has everything to do with her," Richard interrupted. "Emily came here, and in 2 weeks she achieved something you never could. She sparked our son's interest in something constructive. He's happy, he's learning, he's growing." "And you? Are you growing with her too?" Richard met his wife's gaze. "Yes. I'm learning that there's real beauty in the world, that there are people with genuine talent, that there are things more important than money and social status." "You're in love with her," Victoria accused. "Maybe I am," Richard admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. "But not in the way you're thinking. I'm in love with the extraordinary person she is, with her strength, with the talent that never died despite all her suffering. Victoria fell silent for a moment, processing her husband's confession. "If that's how you feel, then our conversation is over," she said coldly. "I'll contact a lawyer tomorrow." "Go ahead," Richard replied. "It might be the only sensible thing you've done in years." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She had overheard part of the couple's argument and felt guilty for causing trouble in the family. In the morning, she sought Richard in his office. "Mr. Blackwell, I need to speak with you." "Richard," he corrected. "After everything we've been through, I think you can call me by my name." "Richard, I heard you arguing last night. I can't stay here knowing I'm destroying your marriage." Richard sighed and gestured to a chair. "Emily, my marriage was ruined long before you arrived. Victoria and I are two completely incompatible people who married for the wrong reasons and stayed together out of convenience." "But still." "There is no but still," Richard interrupted. "You're not responsible for the problems in my marriage, and I won't let you feel guilty for a situation I should have resolved years ago." "What about Tyler? He'll suffer from his parents' divorce." "Tyler will suffer if he keeps living in a house where his parents hate each other and pretend everything's fine. Yesterday was the first time I saw him truly happy in years, and that's thanks to you." Emily fell silent, absorbing Richard's words. "Can I ask you a personal question?" she finally said. "Of course." "Why did you marry her?" Richard laughed humorlessly. "For the same reason most men in my social class marry. Family pressure, social convenience, and superficial attraction. Victoria was beautiful, came from a wealthy family, seemed like the sensible choice. I never asked myself if we were compatible or if we truly loved each other. And now? Now I know I wasted 20 years of my life pretending to be happy in an empty marriage when I could have searched for something real." Emily studied him for a moment. "Something real like what?" Richard hesitated before answering. "Like a true connection with someone, like mutual admiration, like what I feel when I watch you play the piano." The air in the room grew heavy. Emily's heart raced, but she forced herself to stay composed. "Richard, you need to be careful. You're going through a difficult time and might be confusing gratitude with other feelings." "And you?" he asked. "Are you confusing anything?" Emily lowered her eyes. "I can't afford to confuse anything. My life was already destroyed once for dreaming too big. I can't allow myself to have expectations that might break me again." "What expectations?" That someone like you could really be interested in someone like me." Richard stood up and walked over to her. "Emily, you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. I feel like a better man when I'm near you. It has nothing to do with social class or money. It's about who you are inside." Emily looked up to meet his eyes. "Richard, I don't know if I can trust again. In people, in feelings, in anything that seems too good to be true." "Then don't trust," he said softly. "Just don't close the door completely. Let things happen naturally." Before Emily could respond, Tyler rushed into the office. "Emily, Dad, you need to see this." The boy held a tablet in his hands, clearly excited. "What is it, son?" "I was looking up Emily online and found this." Tyler showed them the tablet. On the screen was a YouTube video with over 2 million views. The title read, "American Piano Prodigy Mysteriously Disappears After Accident." Emily paled. Richard took the tablet and pressed play. The video showed a performance of Emily at 22 playing Chopin's Piano Concerto No. 1 with a symphony orchestra. The execution was flawless, moving, breathtaking. In the comments, people from all over the world praised her talent and wondered what had happened to her. "Emily," Tyler said, amazed, "you're famous." Emily couldn't speak. Seeing herself on that stage, young and full of hope, felt like a punch to the gut. "There's more," Tyler continued, switching to another video. "Look how many people are still searching for you." The second video was more recent, made by a classical music channel speculating about Emily's disappearance. The host spoke about how she had been one of the greatest piano prodigies in the world and how her sudden vanishing had left the music world baffled. "Stop it," Emily said weakly. "But Emily, this is amazing. You could come back. You could show everyone you're okay." "Stop, Tyler," Emily shouted, startling everyone. "You don't understand. That person in the video doesn't exist anymore. She died in that accident." Emily ran out of the office. Richard followed her, leaving Tyler confused and frightened. He found Emily in the garden, sitting on the bench near the fountain, crying uncontrollably. "Emily, no," she said without looking at him. "Don't say anything. I shouldn't have seen that. I shouldn't have let myself dream again." Richard sat beside her. "Why is seeing your own success so painful?" "Because it reminds me of everything I lost," she said through tears. "That woman in the video had everything. Talent, a career, a bright future, and I killed her. You didn't kill anyone, you had an accident. I killed my dreams. I killed my hopes. I killed my confidence in myself. And now seeing those videos, I realize I might have also killed the one thing that truly defined me as a person." Richard held Emily's trembling hands. "The music is still here," he said, squeezing her fingers. "Maybe not in the same way, but it's still there. I hear it every time you play. It's not the same, it never will be. It doesn't have to be the same. It can be something new, something different, but no less valuable." Emily looked at him through her tears. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I see how Tyler reacts when you play. I see how your music changes people. Do you think that's worth less because your hands shake?" Emily fell silent, absorbing his words. "Professor Margaret called me again," Richard said carefully. "She wants to organize a benefit concert, not for your return to the stage, but to raise funds for underprivileged young musicians. She said it would be an opportunity for you to play without the pressure of being judged as a professional concert pianist. I don't know if I can. You don't have to decide now, but think about what your music could mean for young talents who lack opportunities. Think about the example you'd set for them, a woman who didn't give up despite all the hardships. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. In the following weeks, Emily went through an emotional roller coaster. Some days, she felt hopeful about the future. Other days, the weight of the past crushed her completely. The medical treatment was progressing well. Dr. Tanner had confirmed that the tremors were decreasing in intensity and frequency. Emily could play for longer periods without interruptions. But the biggest challenge wasn't physical, it was mental. 5 years of shattered self-esteem couldn't be healed overnight. Richard watched her struggle and decided to take action. He hired a psychologist specializing in artists' trauma to work with Emily. Dr. Jennifer Parker was an experienced woman who had helped many musicians overcome creative blocks and career traumas. "What do you feel when you think about playing in public again?" the psychologist asked in their first session. "Terror," Emily answered honestly. "Terror of failing, of disappointing people, of proving I'm truly not good enough anymore." "And what would good enough mean to you?" "Being perfect, like I was before." "Emily, do you realize no one is perfect? Not even the greatest pianists in the world play without mistakes. But they don't have hand tremors." "Do you know the story of Keith Jarrett?" the psychologist asked. Emily shook her head. "He's one of the greatest jazz pianists in history. In 1975, he arrived for a concert in Cologne and found the piano out of tune, broken and in terrible condition. Any other musician would have cancelled the show. Jarrett played anyway, and that recording became the best-selling solo piano album of all time. What does that have to do with me? It's about turning limitations into opportunities. Your tremors don't have to be seen just as a problem. They can be part of a new way to express music." Emily considered those words for a long moment. "How so?" "Have you thought about composing music that incorporates uncertainty? Pieces that play with unpredictability? Jazz, for example, is built on improvisation and the unexpected." It was a perspective Emily had never considered. Her entire training had been in classical music, where precision was essential. "I don't know jazz." "You can learn, you can create your own style. You can reinvent yourself as an artist." That night, Emily talked to Richard about the session. The psychologist suggested I explore other musical styles. "What do you think of the idea?" Terrifying, Emily admitted, but also interesting. I've always been very rigid about classical music. Maybe it's time to broaden my horizons. Want to give it a try? How? Richard smiled. What if we hired a jazz teacher to work with you? You'd do that? Emily, I'd do anything to see you happy playing the piano again. The sincerity in his voice made Emily's heart race. Over the past few months, Richard had become much more than a benefactor. He'd become a friend, a confidant, and, if she was honest with herself, someone she was developing deep feelings for. But Emily was still afraid to surrender to those feelings. The last time she had trusted something completely, she had lost everything. Richard, she said hesitantly, can I ask you a personal question? Always. Have you ever had your heart broken? Richard chuckled softly. Not in the way you're imagining. I've never loved anyone enough to truly have my heart broken. My marriage was always a partnership of convenience. By the time I realized it wasn't working, I'd been emotionally detached for years. How do you know what you feel for me is real? The question caught Richard off guard. Because with you I feel alive for the first time in 40 years. Because I wake up every day eager to talk to you. Because your happiness has become more important to me than my own. Emily felt her eyes fill with tears. Richard, You don't have to say anything, he interrupted gently. I'm not demanding an answer. I just want you to know that, no matter what happens between us, you'll always have my support. And if I decide I want to try performing professionally again, if I want to travel, go on tour, then I'll support you, even if it means losing you. The generosity and unconditional love in Richard's voice shattered Emily's last defenses. For the first time in 5 years, she allowed herself to believe she might trust again. Richard, she said, stepping closer, I think I'm falling in love with you. Think? He asked, smiling. I'm sure, she corrected, and it terrifies me. Why? Because it means I have something to lose again, and I don't know if I could survive another loss. Richard cupped her face in his hands. Emily, I can't promise we'll never hurt each other, but I can promise I'll fight for us with everything I have, and that even if something goes wrong, you'll never be alone again. When their lips met, Emily felt as if she were waking from a 5-year slumber. She had forgotten what it was like to feel whole, to have hope for the future. But the moment was interrupted by an urgent knock at the door. Dad! Emily! It was Tyler's voice, clearly agitated. Richard and Emily quickly pulled apart. Richard opened the door. What is it, son? Mom did something awful. Tyler stepped into the office, his face red with anger and tears in his eyes. She called some reporters, told them about Emily, about the medical treatment, about her living here, about everything. Emily felt her blood run cold. What do you mean? She told the reporters you're pretending to be a famous pianist to take advantage of Dad, that it's all a scam to get money from him. Richard clenched his fists, anger darkening his face. Where's your mother now? She went out with her friends, said tomorrow everyone will know the truth about the fraud who invaded our home. Emily sank heavily into a chair, her face completely pale. It's over, she murmured. Everything's over. No, Richard said firmly. This isn't going to end anything. Richard, you don't understand. When this story hits the papers, they'll dig into everything about me. They'll uncover the accident, talk about the tremors, turn my life into a circus. And what if they do? Richard asked. What if all this exposure brings something positive? How? Think about it. How many people in the country go through similar trauma and believe their lives are over? How many artists, athletes, professionals who've suffered accidents and lost hope? Your story could inspire them. Emily stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. Richard, my story is about failure, not success. Your story is about resilience, Tyler interjected. Emily, don't you see? You've already won. You started playing piano again despite everything you've been through. That's incredible. The boy's right, Richard agreed. Instead of running from the spotlight, why don't we face it head on? How about we tell your story our way? How? By scheduling an interview with a serious journalist before Victoria spreads her lies. Telling the truth about who you are, what you've been through, and what you're doing now. Emily Johnson fell silent for a long moment, processing the idea. What if it goes wrong? What if people don't believe me? What if they think I'm really faking it? Then at least you'll have tried with dignity, Richard Blackwell replied, and I'll be by your side every step of the way. Me too, Tyler added. Emily, you changed my life. I want everyone to know what an incredible person you are. Emily felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Here were two people willing to fight for her, to defend her when she didn't even believe she deserved defending. All right, she finally said. Let's do it. Let's tell my story. That night, Richard called his press secretary and arranged an exclusive interview with Diane Roberts, a respected television journalist known for her compassionate and well-researched stories. It'll be tomorrow afternoon, Richard informed Emily. Are you sure you want to do this? No, Emily admitted, but I'll do it anyway. The next morning, just as Richard had predicted, the tabloids were already splashing headlines about the janitor who pretended to be a pianist to deceive a millionaire. The articles, clearly based on Victoria's information, painted Emily as an opportunist who had fabricated a musical career to take advantage of Richard. Emily woke up to her phone ringing incessantly. Reporters wanted interviews, neighbors from her old building were selling stories about her. Even distant acquaintances were trying to cash in on the situation. Don't answer anything, Richard instructed. Let my team handle it. This afternoon, you'll get to tell your side of the story. But at 10 in the morning, something unexpected happened. The house phone rang, and it was Professor Margaret Williams, Emily's former teacher. Emily, my dear, I just saw those awful articles in the papers. Professor, I can explain. You don't need to explain anything to me, the professor interrupted. I know exactly who you are, and I'm calling to say I'll be holding a press conference at noon to publicly defend you. Professor, you don't have to get involved in this. Yes, I do. I'll show those second-rate journalists the videos I have of your performances. I'll talk about your awards, the competitions you won, the accident that destroyed your career. I'll prove you're exactly who you say you are. Emily began to cry. Thank you, Professor. I don't deserve your loyalty. Yes, you do. And it's not just me. I called your other teachers, musicians who played with you. Everyone is outraged by these lies. We're forming a united front to defend you. When Emily hung up, Richard noticed something had changed in her. The shame had given way to determination. What happened? I realized I have people who believe in me, she said. People who know my real story. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. That afternoon, Emily carefully prepared for the interview. She chose a simple but elegant outfit, pinned up her hair, and took a deep breath. Ready? Richard asked. I am. The interview took place in the music room of the mansion, with Emily seated at the piano. Diane Roberts was an experienced journalist who knew how to guide the conversation with sensitivity. Emily, let's start at the beginning. Tell me about your musical childhood. Emily relaxed and began to tell her story. She spoke about her early years of study, the concerts, her dreams of becoming a world-renowned concert pianist. Her voice was calm, clear, and honest. And the accident? Can you talk about what happened? Emily took a deep breath and recounted that fateful night 5 years ago. She explained about the injuries, about the doctors saying she would never play again, about the depression that followed. Why did you decide to work as a cleaner? Because I needed to survive, Emily answered simply. And because I was ashamed of what I had become. It was easier to hide my identity than to face people's pity. And how did you meet Mr. Blackwell? Emily told them about the day she played the piano at the mansion, about Richard's reaction, and how he decided to help her. Some people are saying you fabricated your music career to take advantage of him. What do you say to that? They can easily verify my career, Emily replied confidently. There are videos, newspaper reviews, competition certificates. My musical life is all documented. Can you play something for us? Of course. Emily turned to the piano and began playing the same Chopin piece she had played on her first day at Richard's house. But this time, when the tremors started in the middle of the piece, she didn't stop. She incorporated the tremors into the music, creating improvised variations that were even more moving than the original version. When she finished, Diane had tears in her eyes. That was one of the most emotional performances I've ever heard. Thank you. I'm learning that technical perfection isn't everything in music. Sometimes it's the imperfection that makes a piece human. The interview lasted an hour. Emily answered every question with honesty and dignity. She spoke about her fears, her hopes, her gratitude toward Richard, and her plans for the future. And what do you plan to do now? I want to teach music again. I want to work with young talents who might not have opportunities, and I want to show people who've gone through similar traumas that life doesn't end when we lose what we thought defined us. When the interview aired that night, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The house phone wouldn't stop ringing. There were messages of support from ordinary people, invitations to teach, job offers from music schools. Even more striking was the reaction on social media. Thousands shared the interview, many telling their own stories of overcoming adversity. The hashtag #TimeStayStrongEmily became a national trending topic. You've become a symbol, Richard said, showing her the messages on his phone. A symbol of what? That it's possible to start over. That dreams can be redefined, not abandoned. Among the messages, one particularly caught Emily's attention. It was from a 16-year-old pianist who had lost 2 fingers in an accident. Emily, I had given up on playing the piano after my accident. Watching you play with tremors made me realize I can find a new way to make music. Thank you for giving me hope again, Emily cried as she read the message. Richard, I think I've found my purpose. What purpose? I want to create a program for musicians with disabilities. I want to help people like me and like this girl discover they can still make music, even if it's in a different way. That's a wonderful idea. How can we make it happen? I don't know, but I want to try. In the days that followed, Emily received dozens of offers. Music schools wanted to hire her as a teacher. Rehabilitation hospitals wanted her to develop music therapy programs. Even record labels showed interest in her compositions. But the offer that moved her the most came from an unexpected place, the Juilliard School of Music, where she had studied in her youth. Emily, the director said over the phone, we'd like to offer you a special professorship. Professor of Adaptive Piano. It would be the first position of its kind in the United States. Adaptive piano? Teaching piano techniques to people with different types of physical limitations. Developing methods that allow anyone to express music through the piano, regardless of their limitations. Emily was speechless. It was exactly what she had dreamed of, but she didn't know it was possible. I'd be delighted to accept. Wonderful. We'd like you to start by developing a pilot course. You'd have complete freedom to create the curriculum and choose the students. When Emily told Richard about the proposal, he hugged her tightly. I'm so proud of you, he said. Richard, none of this would be possible without your help. Of course it would. It might have taken longer, but you would have gotten there anyway. The talent and strength were always in you. That night, they walked together through the mansion's garden. Emily felt lighter than she had in years. Richard, can I ask you something? Always. What's going to happen with us? With the divorce? With your new life? Richard stopped walking and turned to her. What do you want to happen with us? I want us to stay together, Emily said without hesitation. But I'm afraid that when all this chaos is over, when I don't need your help anymore, you'll realize that what you feel for me was just pity or temporary admiration. Emily, Richard took her hands. What I feel for you has nothing to do with pity. It's love. True, deep, lasting love. You helped me discover who I really am beneath all this business persona. And who are you? I'm a man who wants to build something beautiful beside the woman he loves, who wants to support her dreams, share her victories, and stand by her in tough times. Emily's heart overflowed with happiness. I love you, Richard. I love your generosity, your ability to grow and change, your way of seeing beauty where others only see problems. When they kissed under the stars, Emily knew she had finally found her way back home. Not to the place she had lost, but to a new and better place she had never imagined possible. 3 months later, Emily gave her first lesson at Juilliard. The class was small, just 8 students, each with a different physical limitation. There was a young man who had lost his sight, an elderly woman with severe arthritis, a teenager born without a left hand, among others. "Good afternoon, everyone," Emily said, sitting at the piano. "Welcome to Adaptive Piano. Before we begin, I want you to know one thing. Here, no one will judge anyone for how they play. Together, we'll find unique ways for each of you to express music." She began playing a simple melody, intentionally letting the tremors come and go. "As you can see, my hands shake. For years, I thought that disqualified me as a pianist. Today, I know it taught me a new way to make music." One of the students, the young man without sight, raised his hand. "Professor, how did you learn to play with the tremors?" "By stopping the fight against them," Emily replied. "Instead of trying to hide the tremors, I started using them as part of the music. Every limitation can become a unique feature of your musical style." The class lasted 2 hours, and by the end, every student had managed to play at least a simple melody. The most remarkable thing was seeing how each found a different way to approach the instrument. When Emily left Juilliard that afternoon, she found Richard waiting for her in the car. "How was the first class?" "Amazing," Emily said, her eyes shining. "Richard, I'd forgotten how good it feels to teach. How rewarding it is to see someone discover they can do something they thought was impossible." "Just like you discovered you could love again?" Emily smiled. "Exactly like that." As they drove through the city, Emily Johnson thought about everything that had changed in less than a year. She had climbed out of the depths of despair, regained her self-esteem, found a new professional purpose, and most importantly, she had found true love. "Richard," she said suddenly. "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing who I really was when even I couldn't see myself." "Emily, you don't have to thank me for that. You just needed someone to believe in you until you could believe in yourself again." That evening, they had dinner at home with Tyler, who had become an excellent beginner pianist under Emily's guidance. The boy was excited about her reports from her first class. "Emily, what if you organized a concert with the students from your course?" he suggested. "That's an interesting idea," Emily said thoughtfully, "but I'm not sure if they're ready to perform in public." "Why not?" Richard asked. "If the goal is to show that music is for everyone, what better way to do that than with a public concert?" "You two are crazy," Emily laughed. "But maybe that's exactly the kind of craziness the world needs to see." And so the idea of the Concert of Triumph was born, an event that would become annual and forever change society's perception of physical limitations and music. The first concert took place 6 months later at Lincoln Center. The tickets sold out in 2 hours. National and international press covered the event. Emily opened the concert by playing an original composition she had created especially for the occasion. The music incorporated moments of trembling and moments of stability, creating a musical narrative about overcoming and rebirth. When the 8 students performed, each played a piece adapted to their specific limitations. The audience remained in absolute silence during the performances, completely absorbed in the unique beauty of each rendition. At the end, when Emily returned to the stage to play the final piece, an adapted version of Ode to Joy that allowed all the students to participate, there wasn't a single person in the audience who wasn't in tears. The concert was broadcast live on television and reached over 10 million viewers. Social media exploded with messages from people sharing how the music had touched their lives. After the concert, Emily and Richard walked hand in hand through the city. It was a beautiful autumn night, and New York City had never looked more beautiful. "Can you believe what happened tonight?" Emily asked. "I can," Richard replied. "It's exactly what I hoped would happen from the day I first heard you play." "What?" "That you would change the world with your music." Emily stopped walking and looked at him. "Richard, I didn't change the world. I just showed that music can be made in different ways." "Emily, do you have any idea how many messages we've received from people saying they're going to try pursuing their dreams again after seeing the concert? Do you realize the impact you've had?" "A little," Emily admitted, "but the important thing isn't me. It's the people who will be inspired not to give up on their own dreams. Richard kissed her gently. "And that's exactly why I love you so much. You turned your greatest weakness into your greatest strength, and now you're helping others do the same." A year later, Emily was in her office at Juilliard School of Music when she received a call that would change her life once again. "Emily Johnson?" said the voice in English. "Yes, who's speaking?" "My name is Catherine Armstrong, from the Royal College of Music in London. We're calling to invite you to give a series of lectures on adaptive piano at European universities." Emily nearly dropped the phone. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" "We've seen the videos of your Concert of Triumph and were fascinated by your methodology. We'd like to bring you to Europe to teach your techniques to music teachers across the continent." I'd be honored. It would be a 3-month tour stopping in London, Paris, Vienna, Berlin and other cities. Of course, we'd cover all expenses and provide a generous payment. When Emily told Richard about the invitation, he was overjoyed. "Emily, this is incredible. You'll take your methodology to the entire world. But it's 3 months away from you, away from the United States." "So what?" Richard interrupted. "Emily, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. You can't turn it down because of me." "Richard, I don't want to be apart from you for so long." "Then don't be," he said, smiling mysteriously. "What do you mean?" Richard knelt before her and pulled a small box from his pocket. "Emily Johnson, will you marry me and make this European tour our honeymoon?" Emily looked at the ring, then at Richard, completely stunned. You're proposing to me?" "I am. I want us to be partners in everything, in life, in dreams, in adventures. I want to be by your side as you conquer the world with your music." "Richard," Emily began, tears streaming down her face. "I know it's sudden. I know you might need more time to think." "Yes," Emily interrupted. "Yes, you need more time." "Yes, I'll marry you." She laughed through her tears. "Yes to everything. Marriage, the tour, the honeymoon, a lifetime partnership." When Richard slid the ring onto her finger, Emily knew she had undergone the greatest transformation possible, from a woman who had lost everything to one who had found all that truly mattered. The wedding took place 2 weeks before the trip to Europe. It was a simple ceremony in the mansion's garden, with only close family and intimate friends. Emily wore an elegant yet understated dress, and Tyler was the ring bearer, beaming with happiness to see his father genuinely in love. During the ceremony, Emily played a piece she had composed especially for Richard. It incorporated every element of their journey, trembling moments representing hardships, steady passages symbolizing love and support, and a rising melody that stood for hope and the future. Not a single person at the ceremony was left unmoved. "Emily," Richard said in his vows, "you've taught me that true wealth isn't in what we accumulate, but in what we build. We've built a love based on mutual respect, admiration, and partnership. I promise to stand by you in all your achievements and support every one of your dreams." "Richard," Emily replied, "you gave me hope when I thought I'd lost everything forever. You showed me it's possible to start over, no matter your age or circumstances. I promise to share my music and my love with you for the rest of our lives." When they kissed as husband and wife, applause and joyful tears filled the garden. The European tour was an absolute success. Emily lectured at 15 universities, trained over 200 music teachers, and inspired thousands through her performances. In Vienna, she had the chance to play at the very conservatory where she'd once dreamed of studying. In Paris, she was invited for a special performance at the Opera House. In London, she recorded a documentary about her methodology, which would be distributed worldwide. But the most moving moment came in Berlin, when a young German pianist who had lost her right hand in an accident approached her after a lecture. "Professor Emily," the girl said in hesitant English, "I learned your language just to speak with you. You've changed my life. I'd given up on playing, but after watching your videos, I realized I can find a new way." Emily hugged her, remembering herself 5 years earlier, lost, hopeless, thinking life was over. "My dear," she said to the girl, "your musical life is just beginning. You'll discover ways to play that even I haven't imagined yet." Throughout the tour, Richard stood by Emily's side, documenting her journey, helping with logistics, and being her biggest supporter. Seeing the impact she made in every city only confirmed what he had always known. Emily was a transformative force in the world. When they returned to the United States, they were greeted at the airport by hundreds of students, teachers, and admirers. Emily had become a national symbol of resilience. "How does it feel to be an international inspiration?" a reporter asked. "I feel grateful," Emily replied. "Grateful for the opportunity to turn my greatest pain into my greatest contribution to the world." "And what are your plans for the future?" Emily looked at Richard and smiled. "We want to expand the adaptive piano program across the United States. We want to create a network of specialized teachers who can bring this methodology to every city in the country. And we want to keep proving that physical limitations are no barrier to artistic expression." "Anything else?" Emily and Richard exchanged glances and laughed. "Well," Emily said, "we're also planning to start a family. We want our children to grow up seeing that with love, determination, and mutual support, any obstacle can be overcome." 5 years later, Emily was in her home studio, teaching an online class to students from around the world. At her feet, her 3-year-old daughter Emma played with a small keyboard, creating her own melodies. "And remember," Emily told the camera, "music isn't in your limitations or your perfections. Music is in your soul, in your desire to express yourself, in your courage to try something new every day." When the class ended, Richard walked into the studio carrying 1.5-year-old Richard Jr. "How was class today?" he asked, kissing her. "Amazing. We had students connected from 17 different countries." "Mommy," Emma said, running to Emily, "can I play the song you taught me?" "Of course, sweetheart." The little girl sat at the piano and began playing a child's version of Ode to Joy. When her tiny hands missed a few notes, she laughed and kept playing, weaving the mistakes into the melody. "She's learning that mistakes are part of music," Emily told Richard. "Just like the tremors were part of yours," he replied. "Exactly." That night, after putting the children to bed, Emily and Richard sat in the garden where they had shared their first kiss. "Richard," Emily said, "do you regret anything?" "Taking so long to see who you really were," he answered immediately. "No," Emily laughed. "Everything happened at the right time. If we'd met before my accident, I might never have developed the empathy and strength needed to help others." "Do you really believe that?" "I do. I think sometimes we need to be broken to discover what we're truly made of inside." Richard pulled her closer. "And what are you made of, Emily?" "Music," she answered without hesitation. "Hope, love, and a fierce determination to prove that dreams can be redefined but never have to be abandoned." As they looked at the stars that night, Emily thought of all the students she had taught, all the lives she had touched, all the music she had yet to make. She thought of the 4-year-old girl who had first played the piano, the young prodigy who had graced international stages, the shattered woman who had lost everything, and the person she was today, a wife, mother, teacher, and inspiration to thousands. "Richard," she said softly. "Yes?" "Thank you for teaching me that true love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who sees perfection in your imperfections." "Emily," Richard replied, "thank you for teaching me that life isn't about accumulating achievements. It's about building something beautiful with the person you love." And there, under the stars, Emily knew she had found not only the love of her life, but also her true purpose, to prove to the world that no matter how many times we are broken, we can always rebuild ourselves into something even more beautiful than before. The music played on, now in perfect harmony. End of story. Now tell us, what did you think of Emily's journey? Where are you watching from? If you faced a situation of overcoming in your own life, share it in the comments with heartfelt words. Do you believe everyone deserves a second chance to rebuild their dreams? We'd love to read your thoughts. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to like this video and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories.